Prema-dhvani Holiness Invocation Shunyavadi Pashtacha Holiness O Nityananda Shri Jayadvaita Swami Gaura Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Om Vishnupada Purnam Supripad Kasarjasto Sri Srimad AC Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Sri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kun Radha Kundi Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadip Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ki Jai Gangamai Ki Jai Jamanamai Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande. Welcome, everyone. Special welcome to Arshana Swami and Jayadvaita Prabhu. Who am I missing? Gopalasya Priya. Special welcome to Shilavati Dasi, our god sister who has just moved back to New Vrindavan a couple of days ago and has been with us for the last couple of days, and I didn't mention anything, but we're so delighted that she's here.
And Harry, if you'd like to do a little mask.
I can take off my mask. Okay. And welcome to Lakshmi Monji, and to Meena, and to Haridas, and Ravi Prasad, and to Prabhupada Prabhu, and whoever I missed. Okay. Especially anyone I missed because of my poor vision over here. All right. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mayam Tathapi Shapasaltika Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jatapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Shagrashatam Sagana Ragaritam Vitam Stam Savivam Sadvaitam Sadvatutam Pradijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Sri Vishakam Vitam He Krishna Karuna Sindho Deenabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Tapta Kamshana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prashabh Bhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Holi Priye Vanchakal Tarubhyascha Prabha Sindho Pyegacha Paditam Nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Adi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Rama. Welcome again to all. For newcomers, on our Thursday night Istagosthi, pretty much anything goes, any topic that you might like to raise that's relevant to Krishna consciousness. And I'm not the only person who can answer a question or speak. Anyone who'd like to express your thoughts, please feel welcome to contribute. And I wonder who might have some topic bubbling up in their thoughts. Yes, Jayadvaita.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to address any issue. As a person who has been in the movement as long as you, and seeing the original, as how you call it, Hare Krishna explosion that took place, which was all those days of the movement, seeing how the movement grew by leaps and bounds, and the type of movement that we were. Now, 50 years later, I'm wondering how your understanding of how going forward after the big explosion. Now, it seems there was a high Christian implosion, maybe at least in America, or it slowed down, and now things. How do you see it?
A futurology question. Jayadvaita Prabhu asked that as an old goat who's been around since the days of the Hare Krishna explosion in Prabhupada's presence, in essence, what do we see now? What's the state of, how do I see the state of things and things moving forward?
Well, probably have a way of kind of inviting people to come to the movement, live, will take care of you, live with us. We preached like that in the days. And now, of course, that's.
Have we lost that old time loving spirit? Prabhupada had a way of inviting people, come live with us, and so on. And the question seems to imply that we've lost that, and that we're sort of, well, I get sort of plodding along here in North America. Is that what you're saying?
We may maybe to the discussion how is the movement supposed to grow?
How is the movement supposed to grow? Okay, let's start there, because let's start there. The movement is supposed to grow by the old strengths that Srila Prabhupada always put emphasis on. Kirtan, philosophy, and prasada. Those three things, especially as far as I understand. Kirtan, chanting of Hare Krishna, and the distribution of literature, that's also philosophy. So, and it's also kirtan. Where there's kirtan and philosophy and distribution of prasadam, these three things together, our movement grows. I can cite as an example that Kirtan party from New York took up, set up in Atlanta, and within a couple of months, just going to the park every day, chanting Hare Krishna and distributing books. We had like 120 people coming every Sunday to take part in the program and becoming serious, met some of them about Krishna consciousness. So the same old stuff works. Chant Hare Krishna, distribute books, and distribute prasadam. These three things are so powerful. And if we forget the power of these things, then we miss out. We start looking for something else that will be that will work. These are the things that work: philosophy, Bhagavad Gita, the chanting of Hare Krishna, distribution of books, distribution of prasad in conjunction with the other items. There are other things that we can do that will act as channels for these things, or bring people to these things, or expose people to these things. So, it doesn't have to be done always the same way that it was done in San Francisco in 1967. But this is our strength: the chanting of the holy names of Krishna, the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and the distribution of prasadam, food offered to Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam places emphasis there. The association of devotees, giving people the opportunity. There's 5 things: sadhu sangha, Krishna seva, Srimad Bhagavata, Hare Krishna Nam, and giving people the opportunity to live in Vrindavan, or a place like Vrindavan. These are the 5 most potent things. Someone else want to chime in? Those are my opening thoughts on the topic.
Maharaj?
Lakshmi Muni, Raji. I'm just wondering where my speaker is, so I can put this speaker next to that speaker. It's on the bottom, right?
I think Tulsi Priya had something to say.
Tulsi Priya, okay.
Oh, well, if you have something to say, you can go first. I
No,
thought you had your.
I didn't have anything. I didn't have my hand up. But
Okay.
I could, but
Well, it also occurred to me that our personal example of purity and conviction, it seems that a lot of people maybe decide to be part of the movement based on how we relate to them. And I don't mean just like in a superficial PR kind of way, but by forming friendships with them, but, while maintaining our spiritual, our spiritual character, our spiritual identity, and, not just trying to relate to people on their level, but making a genuine friendship while being a devotee and being an exemplary, or at least as exemplary as we can get, devotee.
I don't know how clear that was in audio terms, but giving people an exemplary association. Is that being friendly with people, making connections with people, not on a superficial level, but in terms of Krishna consciousness. Sadhu Sangha. That's the first. Yeah, sadhu sangha. We want to make friendship with people. We want to connect with people, whether it's through a life membership program or a festival program, or this program, or a study program, an online program. We want to associate with people, to share our thoughts with them, hear their thoughts, and so on. Well, yes, very important. And looking for ways to cultivate loving feelings. Sadhu Sangha means Dadati, Pratigrinati. Srila Prabhupada talks about that in some detail. Guru Gyati Pujjati. Yes, thank you. Something else?
it might come back. Whoops, just a minute. It might come back to something we were talking about the other day, last week or the week before, about ashram life, because ashrams are few and far between. And so if a person has a serious interest in Krishna consciousness, it used to be that they would just join us. and they would get a full immersion experience forever, however long they wanted. Some people for their lives, some people are a year or two, whatever. But now those opportunities are not so readily available.
Yeah, we need to offer people the opportunity to sort of immerse themselves in devotee association, an ashram experience. I know Kalakanta Prabhu has said that in his opinion, and he's been quite successful in his programs in Gainesville. In his opinion, ashram life is essential. Giving people the opportunity to live with devotees makes a huge difference. So, sadhu sangha. Yeah. Something else. Yes, Sri Radharani Prabhu.
Maharaj, this is Krishna.
Hold on 1 second. Well, okay, Sri Radharani first, and then we'll lead to Prasad. Go ahead.
In Srimad Bhagavatam, we see the pastime of Prithu Maharaj. He is performing ashram meditation 99 times, and when he's performing 100th time, Indra kind of disturbed his sacrifice. But what surprises me is that the Brahmaji, and then he comes and then he tried to convince Prithu Maharaj not to perform the sacrifice, instead of chastising him as such. Indra is the culprit here, but I can see anyway either he or Lord Vishnu is chastising.
I'm sorry, you need to speak directly.
In any way, Lord Brahma is not chastising Indra, but he is approaching Prithu Maharaj and he is trying to convince him to not to go ahead with the 100th fire sacrifice. It's kind of a little bit bewildering to me when somebody who is a culprit is not really looking at the culprit, but is trying to speak to the person who is actually trying to abide the rules and then follow the rules of the Vedic scriptures.
So this was another question in another direction.
Seems like Lalit Prasad Prabhu has something to say.
I'm going to park that just for a moment, Sri Radharani Prabhu, and see if Lalita Prasad Prabhu, who had his hand up, wanted to address the previous topic. Then we can come back. Yes, Lalita Prasad Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you for your visit to Columbus and blessing us all with down here in Cincinnati with your presence. Well, you were in Columbus, you didn't quite make it to Cincinnati, hopefully next time. But one of the things that was interesting.
Whoa. Let me mute myself.
Okay, now how is it now? Okay. Can you hear me?
Much better.
Yeah, okay. So again, thank you for your visit. And my comment was that the dynamics of when I came to Krishna consciousness in 1972 in Brooklyn, New York, at the 439 Henry Street Temple, was that although I was in college, but a lot of us were hippies. We wanted something different. We were going through a war, Vietnam War, and it's a lot different nowadays. You know, nowadays most of us are, you know, with the university students, they're, you know, seeking financial gain, and Krishna consciousness doesn't necessarily accommodate. You know, although the Indian community has done wonderfully in accommodating their culture with, you know, ISKCON, but Westerners are having a real tough time because, you know, it's a different culture, and we're not so much interested in being hippies anymore. We want to make money. So that's one of the problems. But the other thing that I've noticed, and especially right now in Colombia, where I'm from, where I was born, that there's I spoke to you when you were here, there's one of our god brothers, former god, well, I don't know if he's a god brother anymore, but in any case, they're Hare Krishnas, and they have like 23 farms and so on at this point. And with the tremendous influx of Venezuelans, immigrants, a lot of these farms have taken in, people needing shelter and guidance, and the farms have provided a tremendous source of shelter for a lot of homeless Venezuelans running away from political distress. So, and that's kind of what Prabhupada pointed to, that, to cultivate the farm communities, to, set an example, in that sense, so that, we don't know what the situation with the world will be, but that's one possibility, the farm communities like New Vrindavan and so many others. And also the lack of, try not to criticize each other. There's different groups. There's not everybody's going to be ISKCON. Not everybody, GBC does not hold the keys to the kingdom of heaven. That kind of Roman Catholicism ideology is just not going to work in the future. There's a lot of Hare Krishnas that are going their own way, and they're being somewhat successful. Anyway, that's all I have. Thank you.
Maharaj, you're muted.
Thank you. That's the downside of muting, is that you have to remember to unmute. Thank you, Lily Prasad. I think your words must certainly have struck a chord with Farshana Maharaj, who's nodding yes, and Tapapunj Prabhu, who I was talking with yesterday, about the importance of farm communities, and perhaps our lack of realization of how important these things are. We sort of operated under the tacit assumption that American life will just go on and on and on as it's been doing, and that nothing will eclipse that or hamstring that or topple that. But at any time, things could go topsy-turvy, as you're relating regarding Colombia, and then all of a sudden, people need food, people need a place to live, people need the basics. And if we haven't foreseen that and developed our own way of life in accordance with that, we're going to be, with everyone else, panicking and scrambling, instead of being way ahead on such things and being able to offer shelter to those who thought that materialistic civilization was going to solve all their problems forever. Do you want to add something to that, Prashant?
We are simply adhere strictly.
A little louder, if you can.
If we had simply adhered strictly to Srila Prabhupada's instructions for this community, we would not only be feeding ourselves, but offering shelter to others. But as you said, complacency of the American dream. The complacency of the American dream. And after the Renaissance, modern day life.
Well, I'm having trouble hearing, but from what I did hear, it seems that what we need to do is adhere strictly to Srila Prabhupada's instructions about farm communities, and so that we'll be able to provide for ourselves and offer shelter to others. And that if we've lapsed on that, we need to catch up. Thank you. Tulsi Priya, do you want to follow up on that? I'm still parking your question. Yes, Tulsi Priya.
Maharaj, please take somebody else first. Thank you.
Somebody else. Well, then I'm going to switch topics.
Okay.
And Sri Radharani Prabhu brought up a topic regarding Prithu Maharaj, who had performed 99 sacrifices, and Indra was working overtime to prevent him from finishing and performing the 100th, and had adopted the dress of a sannyasi and stolen the sacrificial horse, and in one way or another tried to, enviously it seemed, prevent the sacrifice from being completed. So then, and Prithu Maharaj was ready to chastise Indra, ready to go after him, essentially. And Brahma stopped him and came out in favor of Indra, that be satisfied with 99 sacrifices and be merciful to Indra. Don't punish him or fight with him. And then so it's perplexing that Brahma should come on the side of the offender, of the perpetrator, as it were, of these adharmic measures, adopting false dress of a sannyasi and things like that. So what I gather is that you're saying, how are we to understand that? I confess it's been a while since I've read that section about Prithu Maharaj. I was just looking at it the other day because there's so much good stuff there in that section about Prithu Maharaj. But it's been so long that I don't remember what Srila Prabhupada was saying about in that section about why Brahma had done that. Is someone more fresh on the topic? I could say something, but is someone more fresh on that than I am? Someone who's more recently read that particular section. Otherwise, I'll speak from what I remember, which isn't all that much. Just jumping in. The Indra's, after all, he's the person. He's the in charge for the governance of affairs for the heavenly planets and so on. And Brahma's saying, all right, respect his post, let him be, and don't, and just be satisfied. You've already exceeded more than anyone else on earth has done. You've done 99 sacrifices. Let's leave it at that, and let Indra have his place. In one sense, he's saying you're greater than Indra. Indra's attached to his post, and you're not. You can be greater than Indra by not performing the sacrifice, and that will exhibit another of your opulences, vairagya, detachment. Let Indra be attached, and you can be detached. Does that seem all right? Yes, all right. And Braj Bihari Prabhu has a hand up.
So Maharaj, in the 11th canto, the Advanti Brahmana is talking about the all-powerful mind. And he says, it's the only problem in the world. It's not the demigods. It's not my karma. It's not providence. It's not the time factor. I think he says, for you, it's not the modes of material nature. It's only the mind. So is he kind of like making a point? Obviously he is. But I mean, are those other factors to be just like, they're like chopped cabbage and they don't really affect us at all? Or is it just that he's kind of juxtapositioning them to just talk about I think he calls it godlike power of the mind, or the way that the devotees, the Gopi Pranadana translated it, godlike. So that's my question about the Advanti Brahmana, because it's such a powerful section in the Bhagavatam.
Yes, it's powerful and wonderful. I don't think I saw the question there.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, you were talking about the power of the mind, how all the other things are like how they pale before the mind, but perhaps because of audio reasons, or perhaps because of my mind, I didn't catch the question here.
You
So,
picked one of the options. It was because it was not a clear question. But the question is, not in reality, but to what extent do we take those other things into account, even though he's kind of saying it's only the mind, but to what extent are those other factors, just like, the time, that's what Bhishma Dev talks about in the 9th chapter, the 1st canto, right? That it's providence or the time factor, that alone is the explanation he gives for the Pandavas experiencing so much. So the question is, how do we look at the Advanti Brahmana's statement? Do we just say, okay, he's really emphasizing a point here, or do we say, no, really, the only problem is really the mind, and these other things we can give less credence to?
now I understand the question. Thank you. Is it truly just the mind that's the only problem in this world? Or what about time, which Bhishma Dev highlights in regard to the plight of the Pandavas? Or what about so many other things, the karma and so on? So is it really just the mind, or is this just a way, is it a rhetorical device that the Advanti Brahmana wants to highlight the importance of the mind, and so he's saying that? That's the question. And it's a good question, and I like it. And you can see, throw my 2 bits in, but they're just my 2 bits, of course. Yeah. In one sense, it's only the mind, because if it weren't for the mind, we wouldn't be here. If our minds were what they were supposed to be, we'd be in the spiritual world, even in this life. So what problem is there other than the mind? And that elsewhere, that same thing is said. I was just reading it in some other context. But, I think Prahlad was basically saying the same thing. That the only, all his friends and enemies, the only problems are mind. It's not Krishna conscious. So, in one sense, I think the Advanti Brahmana's statement is absolute, that if you could only take care of the mind, everything else will be solved. And at the same time, yes, time you look at it another way and say everything is up to time, or everything is up to karma, or everything is finally daiva, the hand of God. So there are other ways of looking at things. And so from that point of view, you can say, oh, it's rhetorical, he's saying it's only. But then it's true also. I've seen that Srila Prabhupada, and I think Shastras also sometimes operate in a different mode of exclusivity than the one that the Westerners are used to. Like if Prabhupada said your service is the most important, that's it, my service is the most important. But Prabhupada could turn around and say to the person standing next to you, your service is the most important. So for us who grew up in the West, that's a violation of logic. If A is most important, then B can't be most important because A is already occupying that space. But in Prabhupada's world, and I think in the world of Shastra, we find that A and B can both be the most important. So So in that sense, simultaneously only the mind. And then we're also able to look at other things. Even before there was a mind, in terms of the material element, there was our causeless unwillingness to serve Krishna. So it's our misuse of independence and misuse of free will. So again, different ways of looking at things. Someone else like to say something about that? Okay, but it's such a thing. The mind is such a. If only we could tame the mind, and therefore chanting Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Kalo Nasti, Bandhuratmanastasya Nastu Shatrudve Varteta Shatruvat Uttalega Natman Sadnat The mind is the best friend of the living entity and the worst enemy of the living entity. If the mind is controlled, it's the best friend. And if it's uncontrolled, we're living with the worst enemy. So this Krishna Kirtana means controlling the mind by fixing the mind on Krishna. Smarta Vyamasatadam Vishnu Vismarta mantra, delivering the mind by transcendental scent. Something else? Yes, Tulsi.
Maharaj, it's a little difficult for me to hear. I heard Braja Bihari Prabhu clearer than I hear you, so forgive me if I'm saying something that you already said and I didn't quite catch. But I really like that chapter about the Avanti Brahmana, and I'm less, I remember less what Bhishmade was saying about the mind, about time, but it's seeming to me that time, what happens as the result of time happens to us, and our minds are what, how we act or how we relate to the world. So it's sort of like, you know, no matter how much in control of your mind you are, time still marches on, as they say, and things can still happen. And so how we respond to that, how we take it, how we process it, how we grow from it, or not grow from it, that's dependent on our minds. So it seems like, in one sense, like you're saying, they're both equally important, or they're both the most important things, but it's like an apples and oranges comparison, because one thing happens to us and the other thing is we acting upon our external reality, or for that matter, our internal reality. Does that?
Yeah, I'm going to repeat that partly for our audience and partly for me to make sure I got it. The time and karma and all of these things present what happens to us, and the mind determines how we respond to what's happened to us. So both are powerful. The time and karma and so on presenting circumstances to us, but the mind really controlling how we respond, so that the person whose mind is controlled, the person whose mind is Krishna conscious, can respond to all circumstances. And again, I'm thinking for Prahlad Maharaj, so many things happened to him. They weren't effects of his mind, they were the workings of his demonic father and so on. But because his mind was so pure, Krishna conscious, he just remained fixed, thinking of Krishna, undisturbed, Naivo Vijay, not agitated, and therefore totally under the shelter of the personality of God. So he's our exemplar. Is that all right, Tulsi Priya?
That was much more concise than I put it.
Oh, okay.
Could I circle back to something that Lalita Prasad Prabhu was saying, or do you want to move on to something else?
You can circle back.
I spend more time online than I ought to, and that's to my detriment. But on the other hand, I see things that are not necessarily within my demographic, the experience of my demographic. And it seems like, there may not be hippies anymore, but there are an awful lot of disaffected youth. And it seems like Prabhupada, however he may have done it, however he made his decision, basically all he did was go out on the street in New York and sit down in the park and start chanting. And whoever was ready to hear, they showed up. And maybe what worked, in 1960s and 70s doesn't work anymore. And we also have a much wider ranging variety of demographics within ISKCON now. It's not a bunch of young kids going out and collecting other young kids to join. But it seems that if we somehow or other make ourselves available, and I'm not, minimizing the importance of Varnashram, that's extremely important, but not all of us are into that yet, and we're not ready for it or whatever. And we have to work with where we are. And I've been thinking about this a lot because basically I've just been locked up because of COVID and not really doing anything. And my mind is churning this like, well, how can I, who don't really have any connections with young people, what demographic could I reach? So my point is, it's just, part of the preaching is just figuring out who to preach to and where we can go to preach, not just, well, the young people aren't hippies anymore, or, I'm not part of a university community, so that doesn't work out. I think every individual probably would have an audience if they just figure out where their particular interests and strengths lie, and then find a way to reach people who also are similar to them. And then, maybe you only collect 1 or 2 devotees, but, times thousands, that's quite a lot. You're muted, I think.
Yes. The Tulsi Priya is saying that you probably reach disaffected youth just by chanting in the park, and things may not be the same way anymore. And many of us are perhaps not best poised to reach disaffected youth. So, but it seems like we can figure out something, whoever we are. One thought that comes to my mind is it's not just figuring out something, it's also doing something. I heard from one entrepreneur who has started a successful company, and he explained his history and everything. And when he was asked what his advice was, he said, do something. And that's what he'd done. He'd done something. It wasn't very big, but he did something, and then one thing led to another, led to another. Probably I don't think he figured out exactly that the hippies would be the best customers, or that Tompkins Square Park. He just did something, and something perhaps unexpected that he didn't expect to be doing, but he did something, and one thing led to another. So that's the first thing, because otherwise we can sit in our rooms and spend the next 10 years figuring out what we might best do. But if we do something, I think of Sankarshan who did something online, sort of in the early days when online wasn't such a big deal, and it's become quite a successful program. He has people all over the world who've come to Krishna consciousness because of his efforts. He's basically one man and his wife doing something. So that's one thought. The other thought is that it may be that I agree with you, it's not just disaffected youth. Everyone is, there's Mahabharika, who is also in this area, was telling me last night that there have been riots in France and riots in Melbourne over COVID-19 vaccine mandates and so on. So there's a lot of disaffected people who aren't youth. The whole world is in turmoil of one kind or another. When I was taking care of my mother, or helping my mother her last days and staying in her apartment in the senior community, there's a whole demographic for you, people who disaffected old people or distressed old people, or old people who are wondering, well, what is it? Do we just play canasta for the rest of our days, play bridge for the rest of our days, and watch the television? Is there something more than this? There's so many different people to reach in different places. The environment, Srila Maharaj used to say, the whole environment is friendly. So the opportunities for preaching are everywhere. It's just a question of our wanting to do it and trying to do something. Let me do something. Let me try to do some service. Let me try to spread this message of Krishna consciousness. There's something in the chat box. Let me just see. Shall we conclude, Praveen asks, that for these farm projects to actually be seen as the lifesaver of society, we have to wait to be seeing the downfall of the American life. Till then, we shall be patient in continuing forward these farm projects. What if the American life never fails? It's already failed. That's the first thing. American life is already a failure in so many ways. Half the people are divorced, 1 out of 5 are clinically depressed. The American life is not the great success that we might like it to be. But I think you're saying, crash and burn. Do we have to wait for it to totally fall apart and for people to be starving and so on? No, if we just get things going. There are already people who are waiting, who are looking for what we're doing. We're so far behind, there are people all over America and all over let's just talk America, who are just looking for something like what we're supposed to be. And if we've been minding our knitting, if we've been doing what we were supposed to be doing, they'd be finding us and saying, my goodness, look at these people, they've got it. And instead, we're thinking about it, or asking ourselves whether it's still worth doing, or maybe we've given up, or in one way or another, we're neglecting this essential part of our mission. And therefore, people who might be looking for us, or looking to us, or looking elsewhere, where they seem to have gotten more of a grasp on it than we have. Maybe it might be nice to chant Hare Krishna and join the Hare Krishna community, but there aren't any, so maybe we should become Amish or something, or look elsewhere. But if we, and I think it's our experience that when we do what Prabhupada told us to do, eventually we find that we are where we're supposed to be. It's not just that we have to wait for something to happen in America before we decide that really we should follow Srila Prabhupada's instructions. We should follow them, and then we'll find that as things change, as the world turns, we will be fortunately situated. That would be my thought, Praveen. Yeah, Tulsi Priya says that the American way of life is currently, there went my chat box, is currently failing. It's just happening more slowly than the news and the popular culture have led us to imagine it would happen. And she also says that disaffected old people of today were the hippies of yesterday. That is true. Yeah. And Panchatattva says, we tend to think of civilizations as falling in some sort of quick fashion. Instead, like the classic case of the Roman Empire, and now the American one, it's a death of 1,000 cuts. It's already happening, but in slow motion, fits and starts. What is it that Srila Prabhupada said? If the American people take to Krishna consciousness, your empire will never fail. Something like that. Yeah, I could say a lot, I think, about how much deeper into it we are, how much deeper down we are than we think we are. The material civilization. How bad things really are without our noticing it. There are things that we don't understand that are going on, that are making life hellish. And then there's, without going into those sort of things, just what we see, just look around and see people miserable, people in, not knowing who they are, what they are. Am I a man? Am I a woman? Am I in between? Those sort of questions really shouldn't be that problematic, and yet it's these are major questions. Do I follow my cisgender or so you've got all that kind of confusion. You've got people who people don't, standard now, people don't want to marry first and then be miserable later. So they shack up first and then they think about whether marriage would, is it safe to marry now that we've been living together for 5 years? These sorts of things don't lead to happiness. They don't. There's so many ways, economically, politically, socially, intellectually, emotionally, how we're troubled, how the world is in trouble. And you can say, oh, you're just looking at the dark side, you're just being pessimistic about it. But the other way is, well, pessimistic is realistic. These things are there. So whether, and on another side, things may be going great or things may be going bad. It's all rubbish, good or bad, it's all bad. Dvaita again. And if people are dissatisfied, good. And let us broadcast the message of Krishna consciousness. And if people are satisfied, well, let's unsettle them because they're satisfied by nonsense. They're satisfied by an illusion. Even if I think everything's going great, my married life is great, my job is great, my money is good, my kids are ideal, my house is so comfy, my country is the greatest, my political leaders are fine men, everything is going nicely, and I'm going to die. I'm going to get old, I'm going to fall apart, and I'm going to die. Do we have a problem? Bhagavad Gita, an intelligent person should always keep these things in front of them. Birth, old age, disease, death. These were problems thousands of years ago. The same problems are with us now. It's not that American society has to fall apart, otherwise we don't have these problems. These problems are with us. And an intelligent person will see that I've got money, I've got this, I've got that. But I'm not satisfied, something's wrong. I'm missing, my life is empty. Well, these things we should see to. Okay, let's see. People are in so much conflict, Panchatattva says, not even able to carry on a civil discourse. And Braj Bihari, who's in charge of ISKCON Resolve, says that's because they don't all contact ISKCON Resolve. Yes, thank you. Yes.
Maharaj, I have a difficult question. I'm a
one of those confused people that you were describing who was asking?
Hold on a second. Well, if you speak without your mask, I think we'll hear you better.
One of those confused people who's asking whether I'm a man or.
You're one of those confused people who's wondering, am I a man, am I a woman? Yes.
And so I'm trying to navigate Krishna consciousness in such a way, because I used to live in ashram as a male before, and now I'm trying to bring Krishna consciousness as a female. And I'm just wondering, is this all just an unnecessary thing I'm putting myself through, and would it be easier just to cut that all away and try to be.
Would it be easier to?
Cut that aspect of myself away, to repress that, and just be my quote-unquote self?
Just be?
Myself?
You're one of those people who's confused or perplexed about gender. You were living in the ashram as a man, now you're trying to live as a woman. And is it better just to forget all that, or what you should do? Yes, our starting place is that we're not the body. And material life, the starting place is that I am the body. And then, well, which body am I? Or I am the body, but I don't feel like I'm the body. The body is somehow, the body I have is not the body that I feel like I should have. So there's a mismatch there. And then what do I do? Is it surgery, or is it, do I dress differently, or, act the way I feel, or act the way my body, externally appears? What do I do? And I think you've caught the essential point there, that we do look at it and say, I'm not this body. That's my starting point. I'm not a man. I'm not a woman. I'm not a Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, I'm not a Brahmin. I'm not a Kshatriya. I'm not a Vaishya. I'm not a Shudra. I'm not this. I'm not. What am I? I'm the servant of Krishna. And I'm not this body. I'm a spiritual living being. And how do I focus on that that's my real identity? This life I'm a man, last life I was a woman, next life I'll be a pig, male or female. So, how crucial, what kind of identity is that it lasts, 15 minutes, and then I change it in another body, another body, another body. Not even an eye blink of Brahma, and I change my body. So if we identify ourselves spiritually, then it becomes less important. Somehow we become very focused on this identity question materially. Black lives matter. So it's all about being black, or all about being Hispanic, or all about being Indian, or all about being old, or all about being young. I'm not any of these things. So if we cultivate our Krishna consciousness by chanting, by hearing, by serving, then other things start to fall in place. And then it becomes, other things start to fall in place. Krishna helps us. Does that help?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for bringing that forward. We are at 8:03, which is, well, let's see, there's one more thing. Oh, well, there's more than one more thing. I'll leave this with you for thought on your own. Murai Gupta brings up, this could be a whole seminar. Is it realistic to think we will achieve any redirection of society without government support? I'm just going to leave that with you as something to think about, because we're out of time, but it's a good question. Oh, okay. Venkatesh is involved with a Srimad Bhagavatam discussion program for teenage boys every Saturday evening. One from Texas, another from Ahmedabad joined. They really want to continue this forever, seeking prayers of all the assembled devotees for this reach out program. So everybody, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna, all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare
2, 3. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank you
Krishna.
very
Thank
much.
you.
Gaur Premanande.
Hare